Okay, so before going over practice quiz 1, let me give a brief lecture on variables and histograms. So a numerical variable or quantitative variable takes on values that are numbers which have mathematical meaning. I'll explain more in a second. A numerical variable can be further classified as either discrete or continuous. So a discrete variable take on values that can be counted. Okay, so here's an example. So for example, a number of items bought by a customer. Well, you can count the number of items, so it would be a discrete variable. Also, the number of pairs of shoes a person owns, that would also be, you can count them, so that would be a discrete variable. And now let's look at a continuous variables next. Okay, so continuous variables. Okay, so a continuous variable can take on any value in some interval, so cannot be counted the values. So you cannot count the values. This is a bit trickier, this one. So here's some examples. So time a person spends watching TV over a one week period. So whenever time's involved, that's usually an indication that it will be continuous, because you can't count time. Well, you can't count it exactly, so it's continuous time. You can break it up into 1 second increments, I guess, but time is actually continuous. Also, another example would be tire pressure, because, for example, you could have 32 pounds per square inch in your tires, but you could put more air in and could have any tire pressure between, say, 32 and 35, just a whole continuous. You couldn't count all the tire pressures in there. Another example would be time waiting in line at In-N-Out Burger. Again, you can't count the time exactly. Time's continuous. Okay, so these are examples. So this one's a bit trickier, continuous variables. Okay, so let's go on to the next topic now. Okay, so next thing is a categorical variable or qualitative variable represents characteristics such as a person's gender, marital status, hometown, or types of movie they like. And note here, categorical variables can take numerical values such as 1 for female, 0 for male, but those numbers are just to denote characteristics and don't have any mathematical meaning. We'll look at some examples in a second, more concrete examples. So a data set is a collection of data usually displayed with a spreadsheet where every column represents a variable, either numerical or categorical, and each row represents one or more, one member, of the data set. So let's look at an example of a data set. So here's a data set. Okay, so here's an example of a data set right here. So we have a spreadsheet and we have some variables up here. So we got a Facebook variable, visits per week variable, friends variable, age variable, gender variable, and we got data down here. So each row represents a member in our data set. Okay, so in the data set above, the Facebook column represents that a person has a Facebook account. 1 represents that the person has a Facebook account, and 0 no account. For example, our first person has a 1 here, so that person has a Facebook account, and that person visits Facebook 45 times per week, and the number of Facebook friends they have is 30, their age is 34, and relating, say, in the gender column, looks like 1 indicates female, 0 indicates male. So we have 1, this would be a female, and the second row has a 0 on Facebook. That means this person does not have a Facebook account. They're 65 years old, and this is the male, and so forth. So this has been an example of a data set. So the Facebook column, so pretty much you can think of it's going to be categorical Facebook, because you can think of it, if you ask the person, do you have Facebook? The answer would be yes or no. So it's a category. So it'd be categorical. So again, maybe a good way to distinguish would be, think of asking, so it's like a survey, say you're asking the person, do you have Facebook? So the response would be yes or no. So when a response is not a number, then it's a categorical variable. So the response, the natural response for Facebook, if you ask somebody, do you have Facebook, would be yes or no, Facebook account. We're recording it as ones and zeros, but that's not naturally how they would answer. Just a way to record the information. The visits per week, well, if you ask the person how many times you visit Facebook per week, the answer would be a number, so therefore it's numerical. But the visits per week would be countable. You could count the number of visits. Therefore, it would be discrete. So visits per week would be a discrete variable. And number of Facebook friends here. So if you ask the person how many Facebook friends do you have, that also would be discrete because you can count how many friends they have. So this would be a discrete variable. The age, well, if you measure the age in years, I guess it would be discrete. But in general, age, it would be a continuous because your age is constantly changing. So age should actually be a continuous variable. And gender, well, if you ask a person what their gender is, the natural response would not be a number. It'd be female or male. So therefore, the gender would be a categorical variable. We're recording it as ones and zeros, but that's not the natural way a person would respond. It's just a more convenient way to record the data. Okay, so this is categorical, continuous here for age, discrete for friends, discrete for visits per week, and categorical for Facebook. Okay, so let's keep going. So let's look actually now at practice quiz 1, question 1, which is here. It says decide which variables are discrete, continuous, or categorical. Okay, so tire pressure, I guess we've already mentioned that one, but the tire pressure, you can't count the tire pressure. So again, it could take on, if you had 32 pounds per square inch in your tires and you put a bit more air in, you could get any tire pressure between, say, 32 and 33. So you couldn't count all the tire pressures you could get. So this guy would be continuous. Let me write that. Okay, so that one's continuous. So number of items bought by a customer. Well, the number of items you could count. So this would be discrete, this guy. So this guy is discrete. So discrete. Times spent waiting in line at In-N-Out Burger. I guess we've already done these up at the top there. But again, whenever it's talking about time, that's an indication that it's going to be continuous. So this guy's going to be continuous. Okay, next one is a person's favorite fruit. Okay, well, that's going to be categorical, that one, because it's not going to be a number. So it's categorical for this guy. Next one, number of pairs of shoes a person owns. I guess we've already done this one also. This is discrete. And lastly, a person's marital status. Well, that's going to be categorical. Okay, I'll write that here. Okay, so it's going to be categorical. So we're done with question 1 now on the practice quiz. I'm going to leave the video here. We'll continue with this lecture and we'll continue with the practice quiz in the next video. Okay, so let's leave it here.